Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this regional workshop on credit ratings in East Africa. I'm really sorry I couldn't join you in person. I was looking forward to meeting you and getting to know a bit more about you and the work you do, but I'm sure we'll have other opportunities in the future. Today, my task is to contextualize the workshop, because you might be wondering why a development institution like UNDP is interested in credit ratings. And from our perspective, this is one of the key issues that will determine not just the cost of development financing in the coming years, but also the volume of development financing. There has been a change in Africa over the last 3 decades. We've seen a gradual reduction of traditional overseas development assistance or aid in African countries, which was about 2/3 of capital inflows in 1990, to a reduction of less than 1/3 by 2022. We've also noticed that African countries are increasingly becoming middle income. You combine both of these, we're seeing middle-income countries who have less access to concessional finance having to rethink the whole way investments in things like infrastructure, technology, and energy are made in very difficult financing circumstances. And this is why we believe that understanding how to ensure that countries are able to access affordable and adequate financing in a timely manner takes on a new importance. Over the last 3 decades, we've also seen a gradual reduction in the proportion of public sector debt that is owed to multilateral and bilateral sources, and an increase in commercial debt. What all of this has done is it has increased the amount of debt servicing that African countries have to do. Today, an estimated 751 million people across Africa, 57% of the population, live in countries that spend more on servicing their debt than they do on investing in health and education. Also, we have seen, particularly over the last decade and a half, an increase in the amount of interest payments that African countries pay. For developing countries as a whole, this figure has increased by over 100%, 131%, whereas interest payments in developed countries increased by only 64%. The interest rate that African countries pay on their debt is roughly an average of almost 12%. Compare that to only 3% in developed countries. We think that not only is this unfair to African countries, but is also making it more difficult for African countries to finance their development aspirations. And this is why UNDP has taken a look at, okay, what are the reasons behind some of these increased costs? And we found out that the way that risk in African countries is priced is generally disadvantageous to African countries. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that when the big 3 credit ratings agencies, Moody's, Fitch, Standard & Poor's, rate African countries, they don't have access to as much data as they have as when they rate developed or more developed countries. And so there's a lot of guesswork or subjectivity that goes into all of this. And this subjectivity does not tilt in the favor of African countries. So we did a study titled Lowering the Cost of Borrowing in Africa, which looked at the methodologies of credit rating agencies, and we tried to isolate the subjectivity in the methodologies. When we did this, we found out that for 19 countries for which we had data, the amount that they are losing, both in higher interest payments and in foregone capital flows, is about $75 billion. This is much more than annual aid that Africa receives. It's much more than Africa needs to invest in eradicating malaria, for instance. So we thought that one of the ways to address this development financing issue is to pay more attention to credit ratings as a development financing issue. How could we work with African professionals like yourselves to be able to improve the data, have a better knowledge of the right policy and institutional frameworks, and know how best to negotiate with credit ratings agencies so that there are ratings that actually reflect risk in countries, African countries, and not perceived risk. And this is why, after doing the report and after quantifying the loss for these 19 countries at $75 billion US dollar equivalent, we decided we have to do something about it. But this is not the first time UNDP has been in this space. Back in 1994, there was only one African country that was rated, South Africa. So in 2003, UNDP partnered with Standard & Poor's and worked to get more African countries rated so that more African countries will have access to financing from international capital markets and from global financial institutions. Because if you remember, as I said earlier, the amount of concessional financing available to African countries has really reduced over the years. And so being able to access larger pools of money is important. And so back in 2003, we initiated this process. And back then, we were focused on the quantity, getting more countries rated. Today, we've gone from just having one country rated in 1994 to having 33 countries rated today. But now we have pivoted. We're saying, okay, we have worked on the quantity, we'll continue working on the quantity, but now we want to work on the quality. And that is why we are launching this new credit ratings initiative for African countries. And we acknowledge that this is not something we can do alone. And so we have partnerships that help us strengthen the quality of these interventions. We are partnering with AfriCatalyst, a Senegal-based think tank. We also have as partners Africa Center for Economic Transformation. We are working also with the UN Economic Commission for Africa. These partnerships not only help to extend our reach, but also deepen the impact we have. The initiative itself has three parts. The first part is a web platform. And this web platform does four things. First, it presents to African professionals a list of all the credit ratings agencies, their methodologies and their processes, and we have a little bit of a comparative analysis. So countries could not only understand the processes better, but know what works best for them. The second thing we do is we have collected and collated and curated research and analyses on credit ratings as a whole, but credit ratings in Africa specifically. We have a collection of archived policy documents and also scholarly documents. And this is part of the capacity enhancement function of the web portal, where you could go and learn about what work has been done and what you could learn from other countries or other thinkers in this area. The third thing we do on the portal is we provide a database, access to a wide range of databases, because, take something like governance. How is it measured? Are the indicators lagged? Are they backward-looking or are they forward-looking? Is it perception or is it actual security or governance risk? You need to know all of these things. And so the data platform gives you an opportunity to investigate these data points and better understand how these indicators could be used by you, not just as you prepare for the ratings, but also as you negotiate ratings. The fourth thing that we do on the platform is we have reach back capacity, where you could ask us any questions you have about credit ratings and development. And we have a group of very experienced professionals who would respond to any questions that you have. So that's the first part, the platform. The second part is what we call the concilium. We are putting together a group of very experienced, very knowledgeable, very Africa-focused professionals who've worked for the global credit ratings agencies, who could be the guide by the side for African ministries, African individuals, African governments who are navigating this process. Because it's not an easy process. And Africa is not peculiar in the sense that it struggles catching up and also relating with the agencies. And so our concilium is available to you to provide answers to questions, provide directions in terms of how you prepare and also how you engage, and also to help with understanding the data side as well. The third part of the initiative is a community of practice. We want to be able to have an ecosystem of African professionals supporting other African professionals. African professionals also engaging in South-South collaboration. The community of practice, we are planning a series of webinars and events and also knowledge products, which we think would be very helpful to you, not just in terms of getting better knowledge or a firmer grasp of the credit ratings processes, but also being able to cross-pollinate ideas and learn from each other. As I said at the beginning, credit ratings are part of this new wave of thinking when it comes to how do we help African countries pay less for commercial borrowing, but also receive more. And our hope is that through this regional workshop, you will be able to gain the insights that you need and also be able to make the connections that will be helpful to you as you continue to work in this area. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm now available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.